This question 283 move zeros of Leetcode, and the question states that given an integer array nums, move all the zeros to the end of it while maintaining the relative order of the non-zero elements same. Now note that you must do it in place without making a copy of the array. Alright. So the question simply says that we will be given an array and we need to maintain all the non-zero elements order same and put all the zero elements at the end of it. So the nums array, and we are not also allowed to make any copies of the array. All the operations we have to do is inside this array only. So after conversion, what we will do is we'll put all the non-zero elements to the front. 1, this one comes here, 2 and 9, and the 3 zeros goes at the end. This should be our answer, right? Now to solve this kind of problem, we will use a method called as toPointer. Simply we will initialize two pointer variables. One is z to be 0 and is nz to be non-zero. And our first task should be to find the first zeroth element. So up till this, we will not even touch this part of the array, right? We will not even touch this part of the array. This is the thing we will edit, and this is the thing we will modify to form the answer, right? The first zero element we will find and initialize it with z pointer, right? And we will iterate through this array and find the first non-zero element and initialize it with nz, non-zero. Now once we have initialized z pointer and nz pointer, we will simply swap them, right? So this becomes 1 and this becomes 0. After swapping, we will increment both the z pointer and non-z pointer to the next element. So now the z pointer is pointing here and the non-zero pointer is pointing here. Now we clearly see that non-zero pointer is pointing to the zeroth element, so we will increment again the non-zero pointer to the next element. Now we have the zero element and we have the non-zero element. Again we will swap. This will be 2, this will be 0. After swapping, we will increment both the pointer. Now this is pointing here and this is pointing here. Now clearly 9 is non-zero and z is pointing to 0, so we will again swap. So this becomes 9 and this becomes 0, and we have our answer, right? So what is the first step that we did in order to solve this problem? The first step was to not touch this portion of the array and find the first zeroth element. So this is what we are going to do. This is the array nums, right? So we'll run a for loop first. First we need to initialize the pointer. We'll initialize z pointer to be 0 and non-z pointer to be also 0, right? Now we'll run a for loop for int I is equals to 0 and I is less than nums dot size I plus plus, and inside this we will find the first zeroth element. So if nums I is equals to 0, we want to assign it to z pointer, right? And we will break. This is the first step that we are going to do. That will get us here, right? This is the first element that will get us to point to 0. Now once we have found the first zeroth element, let's write this section of the code again. We had 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 9, and now z is pointing here, right? We won't touch this part of the code. Again I'm saying we will just arrange this part. Now once z is here, we will iterate through this portion of the array. Now for int, let's now define the non-zero pointer at the front, right? Now we will define int non-zero to be z plus 1. So currently non-zero is pointing here, right? Non-zero is pointing here. Non-zero is z plus 1. Non-zero is less than nums dot size non-zero plus plus. Now what we are going to do is we are going to find the first non-zero element. So if you find nums non-zero, if you find the first non-zero element So first is this 0. So this is not non-zero element. So we will move the pointer to next. This is the first non-zero element. Once you have the first zero element and once you have the first non-zero element, I want you to swap. Now swap is the inbuilt function that we have. We will write simply swap the first element nums 0. Nums 0 points to this element and swap it with nums non-zero. I'm sorry, 0 is z, right? Non-zero, and we'll swap these two elements. Now after swapping, what we did was we swapped this, right? This is 1 and this is 0. Now after swapping, we'll increment both these pointer to the next. So z is pointing here and non-zero is pointing here. Now after swapping, what we will do is we'll increment the z pointer, and this is our code, right? Now we don't have to increment the non-zero pointer as we are in the for loop as we are incrementing it, right? So now this is non-zero is right now pointing here. Now this is not non-zero. This statement will not execute. So we'll increment non-zero plus plus. So non-zero will be incremented from here to this 2. Clearly this statement, this if statement will work, and we will again swap the array. We will swap with this element and this element. This will be 2. This will be 0. After swapping, we incremented z plus plus. So we'll increment the z pointer to z plus plus. Z plus plus gets us here, and non-zero will obviously point and increment it. Non-zero is pointing to here. Now clearly again this if statement runs, nums non-zero is not equals to 0, 9 is not equals to 0. So we again swap. This is 9 and this is 0. Now you can clearly see the last 3 zeros are at the end of the array and all the order of the non-zero elements are same. So this will be our final code, right? First, the first part of the loop, we get to the first 0 element, and the second part of the code, we swap the 0 and the non-zero elements. This is the code that we have. Now we will analyze the time complexity and space complexity of the code. Now clearly we haven't created any new array. So the space complexity will be O of 1, right? Order of 1. Now calculating the time complexity, the first loop that we are running right here, this loop is used to find we use this loop to find out the first 0 element. So let's say our array has n elements in total. We iterate through all these array. Let's say there are x elements that we iterate through. So the first loop will run an order of ox, right? Now the second loop that we are running, this part, this is running over this part of the array, trying to find the first non-zero element and swapping with the 0 and incrementing the value. Let's call it n minus x, and this is running once. So the order of it will be O n minus x. So in total it will be n plus x minus x. So our code runs in an order of On time complexity, and for this space complexity we have O1. Now there is another thing that I have to tell you. We initialize the initial pointer 0 pointer to -1. Why? Because let's say we have an array 5, 7, 2, 9. There are no non-zero elements. So we initialize the 0 element to -1. When we run the first loop, we won't find any the z, like when we run the first loop, the z will not be assigned to any index. So z will be -1. Now after running the first loop, if z is -1, we will simply return, as there are no 0 elements that need to be put at the end of the array. And if this is not the case, we'll run the general condition key. We run the first loop to find the first 0 element, and we run the second loop to swap with the 0 and the non-zero element, so that we can put the 0 elements at the end.